I want to, in typical provocative car dealership guy nature, I want to say this very bluntly. Do car dealers hate you?
CoPilot or me personally?
Maybe we can focus on CoPilot. What's up, everyone? This is Car Dealership Guy. You're listening to the Car Dealership Guy podcast, which is my effort to give you access to the most unbiased and transparent insights into the car market. Let's get into today's episode. Pat Ryan is founder and CEO of CoPilot, an AI-powered car buying app that's helping consumers navigate their car purchase. Prior to CoPilot, Pat co-founded and sold 2 auto tech startups to ACV Auctions. In this conversation, we spoke about the dynamics of family entrepreneurship, building and exiting 2 startups to the same company, simplifying car search for consumers, innovating with AI, and how to leverage CoPilot to find a great car deal. But before we get into the show, please take 2 seconds to subscribe or follow this podcast on your favorite listening platform. It's completely free and will help ensure that you never miss an episode. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Pat Ryan.
All views of Car Dealership Guy and guests on this podcast are solely their opinions. None of the views expressed should be treated as financial advice. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
All right, we got Pat Ryan on the pod. Pat, welcome.
Great to be here.
I got to ask you, the first thing I noticed when I did some research on you and your background, Chicago. I mean, what do they put in the water in Chicago? What's the deal with everyone in automotive, all these powerhouses coming from Chicago? Give us your background and your story.
Well, I was working in more traditional industry in the early 2000s, and we were working a lot with data and analytics, and we saw what an impact that had. One of the stories we used to tell was that the folks at Walmart were so good with data and analytics that on a Memorial Day weekend, based on how hot it was, they could tell you how much purple Gatorade they needed to stock, or of every flavor of Gatorade. If you went to a 7-Eleven back then, it was all the junky flavors you didn't like were the only ones left, but they had every single flavor and color perfectly predicted based on the weather and everything that was happening. And we were trying to bring that to business, and one of the things that we looked at was, so we said, the largest retail vertical is automotive, but no one's ever really done what Sam Walton did. And one of the things that we always loved was, people think of Sam Walton and Walmart obviously as big box retail and all this, but he's actually, when he was originally inducted into the Business Hall of Fame, it was for the use of data analytics and logistics. And so we always thought that was really interesting, that ability to predict. All the Walmart stores used to have satellite dishes so they could have this real-time data transfer. And so our thought is how do you bring that to other industries? And I'd been around the auto business a little bit, but I wasn't an insider. And we started a company called First Look. And the idea was to bring data-driven analytics, kind of what Walmart did, but for the auto industry. And when we started it, I actually went to go try to sell CarMax. So I went and saw Austin Liggett. And we was an early SaaS product. And I said to Austin, I showed him everything. And it was a great conversation. He's going on and on. He's asking all these great questions. He's almost finishing my sentences. And I'm like, this could be the greatest first major customer ever, because he completely gets it. And I said at the end, I had no sales training. So I ended with a terrible closing question, which is, what do you think? And he looks at me and he says, I hate it. And I said, what do you mean you hate it? We've been talking for 2 hours. This has been great. You totally get this. He said, Pat, Circuit City spent 10 years and $25 million building this for us, and you're going to sell it to my competitors for $1,000 a month. That's not good for me. And so that was kind of my induction into the business. But then it took me years to meet somebody else like Austin Liggett. It took me years to find, because the industry, what Austin understood, wasn't as ready. And so my first experience in the industry was trying to introduce something at a time when mid 2000s, when people were still trying to think of everything as gut. I know what a car is. I know what a car is worth. I know what a car should be priced at. And so we were ahead of the curve, which sounds like a self-congratulatory thing, but it's actually purgatory, if not hell, because you're trying to sell something that people aren't ready to adopt yet. And so you got to search for those early adopters. And we eventually got there, but it was really hard because nobody wanted to be Walmart of the car business back then. Of course, it's evolved a lot since then, but that was my introduction to the car business, was trying to sell something that people, it worked. They made a lot more money, but it was like telling them to, eat right and exercise. It's not popular to say no ice cream, no pizza. Like I was selling kale.
And what was that initial product for you, right? So you mentioned you focused on automotive, a huge vertical. Was it just data and analytics and assisting?
Yeah, so it was called First Look, and it was basically the original idea
Mhm.
was that we brought in the same kind of inventory management CarMax did or Walmart did. It was stocking, it was appraising, and it was pricing. And then it also helped you figure out, what to sell. And the original idea, so the original launch of the business was actually the morning. It was in Washington, D.C., because our early monetization model wasn't SaaS. Our early monetization model was going to be getting dealers to trade cars with each other.
Mm.
It was going to be like a dealer roundtable auction where we would have all the data. We would know what they needed to stock, what they needed to sell. We would say, okay, car dealership guy needs to pick up 3 Accords and, this guy needs 2 BMWs, and we'll put you guys together and, facilitate that. So we did it actually in a conference center in suburban Washington, D.C., and it was scheduled to start at 10 a.m. on September the 11th, 2001. Well, by the time 10 o'clock came, they'd shut down D.C. They were shutting down. We all got in a van and drove back to Chicago over, basically straight. And it was very tough. And then eventually we had dropped that revenue model, and that's when I met with Austin. And eventually we got Hendrick as our first big client.
Wow.
But it was a very hard thing to sell data-driven insights to dealers at that moment in time, because that wasn't the culture of the business.
I got to tell you, one thing I noticed about you as I was preparing for this episode is it seems like you keep a very low profile. And look, as an outsider, you have a very impressive track record and background. You've exited 2 companies to the same company, which we'll get into in a bit. You sat on the board of Penske, I believe, up until recently. You've been around in some really great rooms, and I'm sure you've just been exposed to a lot in the business. Tell us a bit about, getting to that position. And also, I'm really interested to hear about these 2 acquisitions to ACV Auctions. So let's start there.
Yeah. So the first thing is so interestingly, my dad is an entrepreneur, so I come from an entrepreneurial family. He actually, his first business was called Pat Ryan Associates, eventually Ryan Insurance. And he was credited with creating what is he's in the Automotive Insurance Hall of Fame. He's in the Automotive Hall of Fame for inventing the F&I office.
I was going to say, I think it's an understatement to call him an entrepreneur. As far as I read, the founder of Aon, is that right?
Founder of Aon.
That's unbelievable.
And now he's got at 73, he founded a new public company, a new company that's now public. He took public last year called Ryan Specialty. We went to the New York Stock Exchange for the IPO. I said, the chairman of the stock exchange was there, and I said, my dad's 86 right now. And I said, do you get many 84-year-olds? He said, Pat, we don't get many 64-year-olds, let alone 84-year-olds, let alone someone who's done it 2-3 times like this. So he knew the auto business, but I was too young. By the time he really started moving into what became Aon, I was no longer, that was really when I was old enough to really understand what's going on. So I didn't know the automotive side of the business much. But in 1968, he gave a talk at a 20 group in Montreal, Canada. And it was Pat Ryan and Associates, and he had a handful of associates. And it was early in the business, and this guy walks up from Philly area, and he says, hi, I'm the general manager and part owner of a Chevy store in Philly. I love what you said. Can we go out, go have a drink or get some to eat? I'd love to talk to you more about it. And that guy was Roger Penske. And so my dad and Roger are these 2 guys who've gone on to create these, large public companies, the global companies, but they knew each other when they were nobody, and they invested in each other. And so it was a great, it's a kind of a great story that these guys grew up together, and they're still doing it. They're 3 months apart in age. And so in the 90s, when I was starting to work, I got out of grad school, and I was starting to work. I had done some work before on automotive supply. We had been an investor. My dad wasn't able to go to board meetings because Aon was global. It's 150 countries, so he was traveling all the time. So Roger invited me to join the board to represent us. And, the privilege of getting to sit around a table and learn from a guy like Roger Penske has been unbelievable. I spent 25 years doing it. I have the greatest respect for him, for his organization. And I just, I try to be a sponge because, there are only so many iconic people in any industry. There are probably a handful in any industry, like a Roger Penske. Maybe he's Elon Musk is of our generation kind of thing, but that's it. And so that was it was incredible. And you learn about how does a guy build what's there. And you also learn they don't get everything right, yet they go on to incredible success. And so you learn from both what they get right and what they learn from. And it was fantastic. Happy to talk more about it, but it was incredible.
It sounds like an incredible story. And I want to break the normal flow of my podcast for 1 second, because, typically I'll start with background, go into more B2B and with consumer, right? But I want to ask you a more personal question. What's it like to grow up in a household like that with a father that is so incredibly successful, and you yourself obviously have been just tremendously successful? What has that been like? What was it like to be raised in that type of household?
It's funny because it's different than people expect, because wealth is a form of celebrity. So people see my dad on the Forbes list or these kind of things, and everybody focuses on, is it like some TV show? And it's not really, because he's an entrepreneur. So when I was young, he wasn't what he is today. And so you're sort of there as along for the journey. And so you have this, it was different each decade of my life, When I was in high school and college, nobody ever heard of my dad, in the general public.
But were the core values the same at all times?
Exactly. That's the thing is it's really, I think there are three big things. One is, as a father, he's been a great father and a great mentor. But as a businessman, he also is always, I grew up around the table talking about what his strategy was, what he was doing, why he was doing it. And we still do that today. And one of the things that's really interesting for my dad is that, I went to grad school, but I've learned 1,000x from him as he goes through these things, kind of getting to ride shotgun and see what he's doing and learn from what he's doing. And it's been an incredible journey, but it's also the kind of journey where, he really is happy to share it. Obviously, I've never been able to buy stock because I always have some information that, wouldn't be appropriate. So for me, if you look at my dad and growing up there, one, seeing his values have always been the same, no matter how much he had, no matter how well known he was, the financial, none of that really mattered. He was always a family guy first. Family mattered first and foremost. He was always very committed. My dad has a view, which is think no impure thoughts and you won't get yourself in trouble. Like, don't even entertain the idea, and don't be around people who would entertain the idea of being in any way doing things across lines and boundaries that you'd never be comfortable with. So I've seen him do that, and I've seen others who cut corners who were, maybe less willing to do so. And you really see people talk about playing the long game, but you have to be willing to ride the ups and the downs. And there are times where things aren't going well, and you could try to spin it, but his view was always be candid, take your lumps, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and come back. And that's the nature of being a public company CEO for decades. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs. And, they lost almost 200 people in 9/11. They were the top floor of World Trade Center 2. Wow. He was supposed to be there that morning. And he was actually over the Atlantic. And, you look at how he handled that, and, people first. They did more for their people than almost anybody. College scholarships, take care of the families, lifetime health insurance for anybody who died. And then they were really committed to that. And then Wall Street punished them for having high expenses. And you say, okay,
wow,
well, this is right by our people. We got to do right by our people. We want to do right by our shareholders, but our shareholders get what they get the benefits they get because of our people. And we always got to stand by our people first and foremost. So it's been a journey like that of 100 of those things. Maybe not all as big and profound, but 100 of those
absolutely
things.
And very commendable. I want to go back to, you mentioned earlier, just, riding the ups and downs. And I found it incredible that you managed to have, you launched an incubator, which I'd love to hear more about, the startup studios, really, found and build companies, but you sold 2 companies to ACV auctions. Can you tell us about that journey, getting to that point?
Yeah. I think there's always a thought that, as you get to a certain scale and size, like how far can you take this? And, lots of people, And what I learned is that we had very good products. So when our products at Hendrick and Lithia, which were our two biggest customers, would go head to head, get challenged by competitors, I was always very proud of the fact that that our dealerships outperformed the ones using our competitors' software. Because you feel ultimately you want the people who are loyal to you, your customers who are loyal to you, to be successful, and to be more successful. You want them to be really, feel the benefit of the loyalty. And I really felt good about that. I really liked our First Look business, and we had our Max business, which is sort of digital retailing, digital marketing. And it was really focused on that consumer dealer experience. So like we had a BMW and GM endorsements, and we had a sales tool that salespeople could use to be more consumer friendly. A lot of times on new cars, they might be well trained, but every used car is different. They didn't know how to tell the difference between the cars. We gave them an app in their pocket that told them everything from across the internet about that car. And so seeing that, we loved our products and we were proud of what our customers achieved. That being said, there's a time the industry's been consolidating significantly. We were with some of the biggest players like Hendrick and Lithia. But at the same time, what I also learned is that it was harder for us to grow as a mid-sized company. And so one of the reasons I decided to sell them was you wanted the business to have the right home. And so I sold the businesses to ACV because ACV is a very hot growing business. It really is trying to expand its set of offerings. And so for our
Which business was this? Which business are you referring to?
I sold both of them. I sold to it. I sold both First Look and Max to them.
And what was the difference from First Look to Max Digital?
We sold them around the same time. So we sold them around the same time.
But in terms of the actual product, the product itself, what was the difference?
So First Look was the inventory management, and Max Digital was the digital retailing, like, the everything in your pocket for a salesperson to be an expert. We also made their ads better on places like Cars.com and AutoTrader and that sort of thing. So it was all about building consumer-centric ads and sales processes.
And now, these companies that you founded, are you pulling off Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk as co-CEO? Or are you just the chairman? Like how does the structure of this actually work? How do you run two companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I started the first one and I had a deal to sell it, and it was too restrictive. It was actually, I had a deal back then to sell it to DealerTrack in 2010, and I didn't. But I really wanted to go start something else, start something new. So I brought in a CEO to run it. And then in 2011, we started Max because we saw sales enablement is really the category. And we saw that salespeople, often didn't do the research they needed to do to be knowledgeable on every car. We would have people who worked for us. A lot of our people used to be CarMax buyers, where the people went out and worked with dealers. And they'd go to buy a car at a dealership, and someone would tell them, "Oh, this is X trim." And our guy would say, "I know it's not X trim." Like, the guy would be making up stuff. You'd see salespeople making stuff up all the time, and we thought, they're only making it up because they don't know. They're not trying to deceive the customer. It's a lot of homework to have 100 cars in a lot and know the story of every car, particularly when it's outside of your franchise. If it's not your franchise, how well do you know the trims and the packages of other brands? And so that's where we got into this idea of sales enablement. So in 2011, I started Max. It grew really fast, much faster than First Look. And then what happened to me is I got it to a certain scale. I was on the board, but I had also been involved in founding a venture firm called Chicago Ventures and an incubator in Chicago called 1871. And I really felt like helping other entrepreneurs was something that I wanted to do. So I took some of the people who worked for us and they ran the businesses. Did a good job with it. But for me, I really liked the idea of, I'd spent 10, 15 years at this point learning the startup world. And so helping our ecosystem in Chicago, helping entrepreneurs both through funding, being on boards, but also these incubators, was something I spent a lot of time on, let's call it between 2013 and 2018. And I really loved doing that. And so that became kind of a third, if you will, founding for me. And it was probably the right thing at the right time. I was probably burned out. I mean, being on the road, calling on, selling it takes a lot out of you. And so We had people with fresh energy. It's like in football, they put a fresh lineman in. They needed somebody fresh in the game. And so that was when I kind of stepped out of those businesses. We sold them during the pandemic very successfully, but we didn't. We ended up. That period of helping other entrepreneurs was a really fun and important one for me because you learned a lot the hard way. You have a lot of scar tissue to show, and feel like, God, I hope somebody else can learn this without having to go through everything I did to learn the hard way.
100%. And so throughout this process, you start another company, CoPilot, and I found it fascinating that you've been so committed to the automotive vertical, but that specifically that throughout everything you had going on, you're clearly the CEO of this company. So I want to dig into that. What is CoPilot? What are you working on now? And why did you decide to go be CEO of another company as opposed to, appoint a management team or incubate it through your firm?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple of things. First of all, I learned after being a VC, I really like the creative process, being an entrepreneur, leading a team, trying to help people solve problems. So that was one piece. I knew I wanted to go back and operate again and found something. Number one. Number two, when I founded Max, I really had the naive point of view, and you'll appreciate this given your experiences, that Max would be how we'd make the car dealership sales process consumer friendly. And we had some great customers who did great things. But at Max, the one of my great disappointments was that our number one requested feature for our sales tool, it's like a consumer walks into this dealership, it's a big touch screen there that they can use our tool to self-shop themselves, right? The number one request we had from salespeople was, can you create a button where we can change the price? So if somebody hasn't been online and I know that, I can raise the prices on all the cars. And I thought, well, that's terrible. If somebody didn't go online and they came here because they trusted you, and if you're going to raise the price, what it made me realize is that given the nature of the sales process and given the nature of commission-based sales, it was going to be hard to get the industry to go really consumer friendly as a vendor, because ultimately you're doing what you got to meet your needs, what your customers ask for. So I actually took the technology, all the data stuff we had created at Max, and I spun it out and created CoPilot. And the idea came from something very simple. You do this, I think for people on Twitter, you do this probably for your friends, which is we had all this data. We basically had built over just 10, 15 years, the best data platform for analytics, pricing, and cars. We have the original window stickers on 150 million of the 275 million cars out there, for example. And so we got out there, and what would happen is our friends would call and say, hey, I heard you have all this data. Can you help me? So our people would get on the phone. They'd help their friend find the right car. They'd tell them why it's priced right. They do everything. They'd help figure out how to negotiate the best deal. They do all this. And their friend would just say, thank you. That was fantastic. And they'd say, you guys should really do that. And we're like, well, we can't do that because our dealer customers wouldn't like it if, we were in the business of using that data to negotiate with them. And so, but that was the original co-piloting. It was people using all our data to help friends do it. And so we had the idea of if you want to make the car business consumer friendly, the consumer needs an advocate. And one of the challenges that the listing sites have, and I like all the people who run them, but they're paid by dealers. And so they're limited in how far they can go without getting pushback. And of course, TrueCar is the ultimate example of that, which is as they started pushing too far, the dealers pushed back on them. And, I don't think it's right to take money from people and then work against them. So we started this business saying we won't take money from dealers. Listen, dealers get free leads from us. They try to pay us all the time. The vision of CoPilot was, how do you get your own expert who knows everything about the car business, will do all the heavy lifting, all the research, search every dealer, analyze every car, rank everything for you, so you're getting the most car for your money every time and you can buy with confidence? And you were talking to the guy, the software guy from Israel a couple of weeks ago, and you were talking about, that is CoPilot. What you guys were describing, that is exactly why we created CoPilot. I love what you were saying. Our name turns out to be a really prophetic one, given where we're going with generative AI. But that is exactly it. The idea is everybody should have a co-pilot. And, some of our dealer friends are like, well, but then you're teaching people how to, be really great at this. And, does that cut my profits? I said, no, if you're a dealer who prices a car well, who has a great car, who's trying to do the right thing, we have made that customer comfortable trusting that. So now all of a sudden that customer doesn't come in wary because they know you're different, because we've analyzed the market and said, go to Car Dealership Guy, because that Accord he has is great quality, one owner, no accidents. It's really well priced. It's got great equipment. It's low mileage. It has all these other features. And so the whole vision is that by helping consumers, we actually help the industry get more consumer centric, because it rewards the people doing the right things. And that eventually will mean those people are more successful, and either the other people will change or go away.
So I think the magic question that everyone's wondering, how do you make money?
It's a great question. So the short answer is the secret to our cost side of our business, which is important to understand, is I took all my best engineers. So I've got a 25-person team that does this, but it's like they're the best at automotive data, and we have a number of people who are really great at AI. So part of it is every customer we get, it doesn't cost us a dime more to serve 1 million people than 1,000 people, or maybe it costs us a dime more, but very little. So part of it is I've got a fixed cost business so that I don't have an increase in cost as we increase the number of people, which makes it easier to make money, because if it was marginal cost, it would run me out of business. The answer is we make money. So 97% of our customers go to our site. We have almost 2 million people on SimilarWeb would tell you, almost 2 million people going to our site every month. That's doubled since December. So we're acquiring them for free. And 97% of our customers will go to a dealer without the dealer ever knowing we were involved. 3% will go into our app and use it to help them across the way, but they stay with us. And so we might help them refinance their loan when interest rates go down. We're not in that market anymore, but we were before. We primarily make money off insurance. So we have partnerships with different folks, including Allstate, helping people save money on their insurance. And over time, we'll help them with more and more. But it's really that group that becomes our core, almost like an affinity group. So our network becomes this group of people who then say, that was such a great experience. I want to stay with you. Help me figure out everything else. And that's how we make money, is by saving them money, because they know we're like Costco, which is we're only going to make a little bit of money on them. On insurance person will make $500, $1,000 on something. We'll make $100, but we're fine with that because we're in the long-term relationship with that consumer. And if we can pass along most of the savings to them, they'll be loyal to us, and that'll be a great long-term partnership.
2 million visitors a month. Incredible number. How are these visitors finding you?
Primarily through SEO today, and then word of mouth. Our customers really love us. We have a 4.8 rating in the App Store. And, our customers really, they love us. I think they realize that we're on their side, and there's something about that, just like I think a lot of the things you've done out there tweeting. When you are transparent with people in a really constructive way, they trust you because you've earned their trust. And once you've earned people's trust, there's this sense of like they can relax and they can start to solve the problem. Where a lot of people, I think, in buying a car have had a negative experience, and so they're locked up. They're nervous. They're trying to not be taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. And having somebody you trust help you navigate the way, I think, is really important. So word of mouth is half our traffic.
Wow.
And then SEOs become really big because we are searching every dealer. We are analyzing for our customers. We are analyzing every car. And then we're ranking all of them. And we can rank them because the dealer's not paying us. So the dealers who get high ranked love us, and the dealers who are low ranked, no one ever sees their cars. So they don't actually get hurt. But if we were getting paid by dealers, we could never rank them because, they would be worried about, I'm paying you $1,000 a month. Why aren't you ranking me higher? And consumers like it because the listing sites have to show sponsored cars more prominently. We only show what's better for you.
Do you think you're leaving dollars on the table, especially from the dealers that are high ranking? do you think you could monetize that cohort of dealers? I mean, and you're smiling. Looks like something you've
It's
thought about possibly.
It's a great question. My board asks it a lot, of course. My investors ask that question a lot. So you sound like one of my investors for sure. I would only want to do it in a way if it didn't take away from the independence that our customers trust. Our members trust us, and that's the most valuable asset we have, and I've been hesitant to do it. There's no question that we're under-optimizing the monetization of what we have, under-monetizing what we have. But, it's easy. It takes a lot of time to build trust, and you can burn it in a split second. So I respect the fact that they trust us, and I really want to be respectful and protective of that.
Yeah, look, I think I know the feeling, right? Because I think what I take pride in is that I consistently try to share an unbiased perspective. And in certain cases,
you do a great job of it.
And it's hard, frankly, like in certain cases, I may piss off consumers. In certain cases, I may piss off some dealers. But, you're constantly tiptoeing on that fine line because you want to, like you said, you want to earn that trust of the marketplace. And so it's not an easy task. And I'm glad your board members are bringing up that question. I want to ask you another question though, but how did you initially wedge into the market, right? So you have this idea. Knowing the car listing marketplace is very competitive. And so how did you manage to wedge into this market, and how do you retain your spot in just what's such a saturated market, or at least it feels like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first answer is it's hard. I mean, they're just in consumer in general. I mean, think in the last decade, how many consumer internet businesses have broken out? Not a lot. I think there are two ways that we've done it. The first one is early on, we were very successful on Facebook, actually, in getting that chicken egg problem solved with early users. And then I think the fact that we can position as independent, and we're not actually a listing site. We're a search engine. We have a search engine. So what we do different than a listing site is nobody sends us their inventory. We have a search engine. It's an automotive search engine. And we go find cars. And here's the thing is it's a win-win for dealers on two levels. One, if we find your car and it does well, you're going to get a free lead that's highly motivated. And if you don't do well, it's like you never saw us anyway. So there's no real downside to the dealer for us being a search engine. So we're really additive to them. Even though we're empowering consumers, not every dealer likes that. The good dealers do, because they're like, hey, I worked hard to price this fairly, but you're giving me third-party validation. So the good dealers, the consumer-centric dealers, trust that. The other benefit we do that I would tell you that in the search engine part of it is by being transparent with consumers, it's allowed us to counter position. There's never a sponsored car. And people recognize that. And we say how long the car's been online. And they say, the dealer can't like the fact you told us it's been on 123 days. But it builds that trust. But the other thing we do for dealers that nobody else does in pricing is we actually give the car full credit for what it has. So, for example, if you take a BMW, there's a lot of packages in BMWs that aren't factored into the trim. If it's a fully loaded BMW versus one of the same trim that's cold weather package, that has heated seats, that has a whole bunch of other really great pieces, we actually will reflect that in the market price, where a lot of those pricing tools out there don't. And so dealers, a loaded car will get a fuller, fair price from us than it will from other third parties, because it's value to the consumer. I mean, if I can get $10,000 worth of packages for $5,000, that's a great buy. So I think it's that trust. I think it's the fact that we're so different than everybody else, and that we don't take money, and that we're independent, has helped the word of mouth. And I think the generative AI, we picked the name CoPilot for a reason. Our vision was always what I've heard you describe, which is the consumer needs
that one-stop shop.
So we just had a hackathon here. All our engineers came into town. We had a hackathon, and we have some really exciting generative AI things. We have a plugin we've submitted to the plugin store right now. We have we've been working generative AI and ChatGPT into our product, because if you take our differentiated data and the independence, we're not afraid of what the results are because the chips will fall where they may. But if you have customers who might look bad as dealers who are paying you, you have to be very, very careful. And so there's a liberation to being on the consumer side of the table only, which is we can just do the right thing, focus on that, and we'll do right by the consumer. And the dealers who are doing the right thing will be rewarded. And the other ones will never hear of us. They won't even know we exist.
On that note, I just think that the next generation of car shopping is going to be wild. I mean, I look at the Apple Vision announcement, right? The headset, and I think about shopping for a car, right? The first, call it dealer, or the first company that creates that app for dealers to, be on the Apple Vision Pro and truly see, like when Carvana came out with the 360 view, it was like, okay, wow, this is new. And then it got commoditized and every dealer pretty much has that now. And I just imagine this world where, like I said, you go on this website, you say just what you want, and maybe you don't know everything you want. Maybe you know exactly what you want. It doesn't matter, but you state a prompt and boom, it pulls up on this just, augmented reality. You see the car, you spin it with your finger, and you see it in such fine detail that it truly takes the car shopping experience to the next level. I don't think that's a crazy world. I think that's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
I think that's right. The other thing that's going to happen that we've been working on for quite a while, we call diagonal search, which is, okay, show me, horizontal search is like, show me all the Hondas or show me all the pickups. And, for vertical searches, you go down, like, show me all in this class. And then you can go kind of across. But we call diagonal searches like, I need an SUV with 7 seats with, captain's chairs because I got a car seat in the way back that I got my kids out of the back row in. I need to have cargo space. I need to have good fuel mileage, and it's really important to me that it has, high 5-star crash test ratings. What should I be looking at, right? Because this is a generation of people who aren't car people, And so I'm not a car guy in the sense that I don't know. I don't collect cars. I don't have that sort of thing. But giving consumers a sense, I think it's all going to change. And if you think about it, you asked the question about the listing sites. Well, those are the original classified ads. If you look at the big listing sites, cars.com was classified. That was classified ventures. Mm-hmm. AutoArm. Autotrader.com was, from the Auto Trader magazine. Mm-hmm. So if you look at, it's amazing those businesses, what they've done. I mean, what other businesses from the 1990s internet that pivoted out of the newspaper world are still around, let alone still as big and prominent as they are? It's remarkable what they've done, but it also raises the question of, is that going to be their business model in 5 or 10 years? Like our search engine, people they like the fact that no one's paying us for it. They like the fact they can see everything, not just the people who are paying for it. So I think there's an interesting innovator's dilemma question here that you're right on the money on. And I think these guys will make it because they're going to invest in the kind of technology you're talking about, but they have to get that balance right because you got to do it in a way that brings their customers along, lest they fall into the trap that TrueCar fell into where, they leaned a little hard one way and the dealers, reminded them who their customers were and paid the bills.
Yeah. I just had Scott Painter on the pod. So that's it's already live by the time this pod is live, but it speaks a lot about that. One point that I want to, you mentioned, you said we're not a generation of car people. And I think, I just mentioned Scott Painter and what he's working on and his company. It's very interesting because the thesis is all about that the car for, the next generation is more of a utility, much more than, call it, the prior generation, which, to your point, it's like, hey, I need something to get me from point A to point B, has 7 seats and is good on gas. Get me whatever you can. And I just think that unlocks an entire new set of businesses, economics, because now I can, operate a subscription company with 1 or 2 models of vehicles. And at the end of the day, as long as the economics make sense, I'm going to have plenty of demand because maybe someone doesn't care as much, or maybe just cars are a lot more commoditized. And if I have CarPlay, I could care less if it's a Chevy logo or a Tesla logo or a Toyota logo. So I do think that's a very big monumental change in consumer behavior. and it's going to have a big impact on lots of businesses. I want to go back for 1 second though on to CoPilot. And I want you to explain to me and the audience, like a third grader, who is the perfect consumer for Copilot, and what is that experience really like? Or more importantly, how is that experience different from other listing sites?
Yeah. So we wouldn't call ourselves a listing site. We're really in that,
Sorry.
No, but I hear you. We probably superficially look like one. So I totally get it. I think the first thing I'd say is the perfect person for us is someone who's smart. Most of our people are buying new or nearly new cars. They look a lot like our employees, frankly. But they're not car people. They don't know a lot about the car business. They don't know a lot about cars. So they need help figuring it out. Often they're having families. So I have a first child. They need a different car than when I was single. I've got 2 kids and now we're carpooling. Oh, now I've got my 16-year-old learning to drive a car. Like they go through these life transitions. They don't know enough about it to know what they need, but they're smart.
They're obviously smart if they're listening to this podcast, right?
Exactly. And they want to be empowered. I mean, that's why they listen to the podcast, right? They want to be empowered, but they don't want to have to go spend hours getting to be expert in something they don't know. And so for that person, it's the equivalent of, the simplest way I would say it is, imagine you have a brother or a cousin, a friend, a neighbor who knows the car business. Imagine you're a car dealership guy's neighbor and I come over to you and I'm like, listen, I got to get a new car. My daughter just turned 16. I want something safe. I want something that's, not going to be, is going to not be too sporty. I don't want it to be show offy. I want something that's reliable. Help me think about this. It would be as if you sat down with me and said, Pat, I will do you the favor of let me give you 5 models to think about. And let me tell you why you might want to think about these. And then, all right, when you search for cars, show me the cars you have, and I'll tell you which ones you should consider and which ones you shouldn't. It'd be like having you, but as a bot. Well, let's call it 80% of you.
Productizing me.
Yes, it's to productize an expert like you who wants to help people. And that's why we say you're still the pilot, but here's your co-pilot. They're going to do the heavy lifting. They're going to do the analysis. They're going to bring the expertise, but you're still the decision maker. And that's what this is about. I have a patent in earlier generation expert system that we did at First Look years ago. And we've been following this whole generative AI piece. And the whole idea of Copilot was exactly this. We picked that brand name because we want to do that with AI. The data that we have is the key to doing that with AI. And it's how do you have a car dealership guy in your pocket helping you with every step of the process?
How is that very tactical experience different for me? Right? If I go right now on any platform, listing site, anywhere, a search engine, and I say what type of car I want, I see a list of cars. How is the Copilot experience specifically different?
Sure. So it's because of the Copilot. So you'll onboard with us. You'll tell me, all right, what are you looking for? All right, tell me what you're looking for. Do you have a particular model in mind? A lot of people have a hypothesis in mind. I've got a model I'm looking for. I'm looking for a 2020 or 2021 GMC Yukon. Okay, great. What equipment do you want on it? A lot of people don't even know what trim is. So we'll say, oh, well, you really need the Denali, or you really need the SLT. Okay, we help them look at these things. And then what we do is we will take their area and say, how far are you willing to look? Most people know more than 100 miles, unless it's something rare, and then maybe they'll go further. Great. Every day we will search within 100 miles of your house. We will find every dealer. We will search every dealership.
Wow.
We will find every matching car. We will then find everything from across the internet about every single car. We will analyze every single car. We will give it a buy grade. We will give you a sense of, what makes it great and what makes it risky. We'll give you a pros and cons, kind of like reasons to buy, reasons to pause. And every morning when you wake up, you will have a choice of how you want to do it. We call them hidden gems. What are the 10 best cars matching what you want in your area? And it's like Tinder. You swipe left, swipe right. You're waiting for the train in the morning. Great. I'm going to look. Okay. I've now looked at the 10 best cars in my market because my Copilot did all the work for me. Or if you're like, hey, maybe I just want something where I'm going to get just a huge amount of car for my money. It won't be exactly what I want. We call that the steal of the day. You can play with the steals of the day. Same thing. Tinder your way through it. Or if you're somebody who's like to power into it, great. We're going to take every car in your market and we're going to rank it. So unlike going to a listing site, So first of all, the curation I just described, you don't find on the listing sites because, obviously there are winners and losers in that. And you can only do that if the dealers who are losing aren't your customers, aren't the ones paying you. So the curation is a big difference. The other big difference that you have is when you do search yourself, every car is ranked. We rank them from best to worst. And then you can filter all that and use all the data that we bring. And so you're always getting a sense of that expertise weighing in on every decision, but you're the decision maker. And so there's this sense of you do a lot less work, but you know a lot more in a lot less time than you could ever on any listing site.
Yeah. You're making me want to find a car in CoPilot. I want to, in typical provocative car dealership guy nature, I want to say this very bluntly. Do car dealers hate you?
CoPilot or me personally?
Maybe we can focus on CoPilot.
Our clients obviously, when we were serving them, loved us because we made them very successful. I would say that anybody who encounters us, 99% of them love us dealer-wise. Why? Because they won, right? They won. They had one of the 10 best cars, and that consumer swiped right on them. And so when they say, how'd you find me? I found you through CoPilot. Now, once in a while, if there's something, something that's wrong or different, then we got to work that out. So most dealers who experience us love us because they won. And you know what it's like as a dealer? A consumer comes in feeling confident that they know they want to buy that car. That's a better experience for you as a dealer because you start on third base because they trust that car. They come in empowered with knowledge. They're not sitting there like afraid of, engaging with you. You got to understand when our customers, before they find us, we did focus groups interviews a couple weeks ago. I sat in on 3 of them. They were 3 women sales executives, VPs or directors, run sales teams. And each of them had a story about the last time they bought a car. One of them said, I bought a car I didn't want. I regret it every day. But I just, I didn't know what was going on. They were talking so fast. Mm-hmm. And the second one said, I know I didn't get treated right. And the third one, same experience. She had both. I bought a car and I didn't get treated right on the new one. And so there's this sense of lack of trust that the worst experiences of the car business create for people. And I think good dealers pay the price for that. Dealers try to do the right thing, get loyalty from their repeat customers, but new customers come in and assume that they must be like somebody who gave them a bad experience. So for those dealers, we're empowering them. Now, if we were doing Super Bowl commercials, there'd be plenty of dealers who would say, well, I don't like that because I don't like the consumer knowing everything. But those dealers, we don't send somebody to them, so we never hurt them. There's no downside for them.
Like you mentioned, you have this interesting selection process where, it's the customers or the well-priced cars receive those leads. So it's almost as if the only encounter, and I'm generalizing, but almost as if the only encounter dealers have with you is a positive encounter. So I think it's an interesting dynamic given the fact that the dealer is not your customer, they're not paying you. And so it does set you up for an interesting dynamic there. Zooming out a little bit, I think, going back to the fact that you mentioned your 2 million visitors per month, which is, an incredible number. I'm really curious to know, being in your seat, are there any trends or any analytics, anything interesting that you're seeing? You guys do put out a lot of data and you've shared some data with me in the past. And so are there any notable trends that you're noticing right now from when it comes to either shopper behavior, buyer behavior, markets, anything on that side?
Yeah, there's a lot, and you've tweeted and talked a lot about this. I think it's really important. I'd say the first one is we're in the continuing trend where the sedan is going away and the crossover is growing. And the problem with that is that, this was happening before the pandemic, but has accelerated. It means on used cars, you got more sedans than people who want to buy sedans and less crossovers than people who want to buy crossovers. So that's definitely a part of it. I think the pricing trend, the thing that we put the alarm on, and you were as well, is the market was declining for most of last year. It peaked for nearly new cars in August. It peaked for other cars kind of end of Q1, older cars end of Q1. And prices were going down month after month after month. And then February hit and cars started to tread water. Used car price started to tread water. And then we got into a situation where prices have been going up almost ever since. They've been kind of treading water again these last few weeks. But, SUVs are up $5,000 in 10, 12 weeks. I mean, that's jarring. And so I do think, you've talked about, I don't think we're going to get back to I think we're going to get to a new normal, not normal. The return to normal that we thought may have happened. Given this spike now and the fact that less lease returns in the future in the next few years, there's going to be less used cars available because we made less new cars and we especially leased less new cars over the last couple of years. I think cars are going to cost more. And so I was looking at data last night, prior to the pandemic, 38% of the new cars on dealer lots were listed below $30,000. Today, that's 8% of cars.
Wow.
Before the pandemic, 52% of used cars, and I'm leaving off like the consumer auction cars, but of the dealers consumers would typically look at, 52% of cars were under 20,000. Today, it's 25%. So I think the other trend is that prices have gone up on new cars, prices have gone up on used cars, and I think some of this inflation is going to get baked into a new normal, which means that buying cars is less accessible than it's been in a long time. And I think this is a big problem. And then you add in interest rates, which make it effectively more expensive to own a car.
Big time.
I think that's a real negative for consumers. And I think it's bad for the economy.
Yeah. And as you know, I tweet about this a lot. Clearly prices are being buoyed by just the lack of supply. The used side, while we have seen a little creep up just a tiny bit now in April, and likely in May, we still are very far on where we should be from a supply perspective, and all that is keeping prices inflated. I think supply is going to be the fix here. Interest rates is not helping, like you said, right? The average interest rate on a used car loan right now is close to 14%. On a new car loan, it's just about to hit 9%. I just tweeted that out. So it's a crazy environment that's changed so rapidly, and it's putting a lot of pressure on consumers.
Well, I would add that I think the other problem we have is that the new car supply will put a little softening into the market. I think 31% versus 82% we're paying over sticker. But the cars are just more expensive. I mean, the average new car is over $50,000 now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they're just more expensive. And, we're having challenges. I mean, GM has another chip shortage going on right now. So, Yukons and Tahoes are down to like 20-day supply. And so, you look at that and you say, we're not going to have enough used car supply to really get used cars to come back down. And the new cars they're making are just bigger and more expensive. And so I think we've gone through kind of almost a structural upward shift in the cost of owning a car. And then you throw in interest rates and, I do think it's less accessible than it's been. And I do think it's going to be a problem. I mean, my belief is our data shows that the only reason this is happening is because the upper end of the market, the lower end of the market has actually been treading water all year. But the upper end of the market, because the San Francisco Fed reported last month that there's $500 billion left in excess savings on top of what people would normally have from the pandemic between lockdowns, not spending money, and stimulus money. And that $500 billion is what's keeping the economy, the consumer, so strong. But it's creating this paradoxical problem, which is, consumers can afford to buy cars, and they're selling a lot of cars. But we're baking in these high prices in a way that when supply goes down further, I don't think the prices are going to ever bounce back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
At least with old normal.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a structural upshift. And especially, I think the main point being that the average new car, the cost to produce a new car has just gone up. And that's just going to trickle down to used cars eventually. So I think on a more positive note, I do want to know, what's the vision for CoPilot? Like how does the company and the brand and the product evolve over the next 5 years?
Well, I mean, we've been long playing in the AI space. We've used AI to power some of our data and models. By the time this comes out, we'll have a plugin in the ChatGPT plugin store. I think CoPilot will be what you described on your show a couple weeks ago, which is with the AI, we will be able to 10x, I think, what our copilots can do in your pocket. And so Ours isn't for everybody. I mean, I think the segmentation of the car market's an important thing to think about. If you always buy a BMW or you always buy a Mercedes and you go to the same dealer for service, you always buy a Lex, you go to that same dealer for service and you have a good relationship with the salespeople, you don't need a co-pilot necessarily but if you're somebody who doesn't know a lot about cars, doesn't have a deep relationship with the dealership, and often has to look, your needs evolve as your life evolves, you either need to want to go become a student of the car world, or you need a partner, you need a co-pilot. And so we want to be that in everybody's pocket. And our view is that an empowered consumer actually buys faster, buys with more confidence, and we think it creates a healthier car business. And, because we don't make money off the auto dealer ecosystem, we're happy to have lots of people succeed. We work with Carfax. We send people to dealer websites. We'd be happy to send people to listing sites. Like, our view is we're just that partner to help them. And so we don't see it as a zero-sum game with us. We see it as we're something that makes the ecosystem move more smoothly, because an empowered, enlightened consumer won't be reticent to go into that dealer. We always say when we monitor consumer shopping, we'd say it's amazing how long they're circling the airport. And they basically, a lot of them don't want to go in until they have to. They're like, we call it a crash land. They run out of fuel and they crash land because I just had to go in. Where if they feel confident, they go in sooner. When they meet your people, they see your people and say, hey, I'm really excited about this car, and here's why. Like, a motivated, empowered consumer, there are some dealers who haven't come to accept that yet, is better for their business. It is better. They will buy with more confidence. They will be more loyal because they don't have to feel like when someone's doing the right thing that they have to be protecting against it. They can know who's doing the right thing and trust and build relationships to people doing the right things. And so we feel like we can be that connective glue as the consumer advocate that helps the dealers and others in the ecosystem doing the right thing actually build the relationships with consumers that they really want to have, but have struggled to build over the last decade or two, except for that core 30% of loyal customers who return all the time.
Well stated, my friend. Very well stated. Pat, where can the audience learn more about CoPilot and yourself?
So we're in the App Store. CoPilot is our app name. Hopefully be in the plugin store by the time this drops. So ChatGPT plugin store as well. Our website is copilotsearch.com. You can go there. Our Twitter handle is CoPilot for Car. Our account is CoPilot for Car Shopping. We're big followers of yours. And I'm at Pat Ryan Chicago on Twitter as well.
I love it. Pat, this was awesome. Thanks for sharing all the gems. Loved hearing the stories from back in the day. And I'm excited to keep an eye on what you guys are doing. I think there's some really great things on the horizon here with all this new technology. And I'm pumped about what you're going to build. I think you're on a great track. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Listen, we learned a lot from you, and we appreciate all you do for the ecosystem and consumers. It's really fantastic.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.